Wall Street veteran Bernard Madoff has been arrested and charged with running a $50 billion Ponzi scheme.
Congress wants to know what caused the Enron meltdown.
Now, while the collective rage currently is focused on WorldCom,
Tyco CEO Dennis Kozlowski was convicted of looting hundreds of millions of dollars.
This is one of the biggest fraud cases ever.
Their president's a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
Find out more on this week's episode of White Collars, Red Hands.
We put a lot of trust in the government. We trust them to run our schools that educate the next generation of TikTok dancers. We trust them to enforce the laws of the nation. Unequally, but hey, they're trying, right? We trust them to build our infrastructure, including all of the potholes that almost send me from my bike daily in Chicago. Hell, we even trust them to run the mail that allows me to buy fan art of two anime characters kissing in a large enough print to dominate the majority of my house. Don't worry, that last one didn't happen yet. But did you know that we also trust the government to back certain public companies in a move that somehow is never brought up in the argument against certain democratic socialist institutions already being present in America? The U.S. government has established certain publicly traded government-sponsored enterprises, one of which is the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation, known commonly as Freddie Mac. And in the early 2000s, the darling of the American government found itself embroiled in a case of the government doing what it does best, absolutely failing at almost everything it was set up to do while simultaneously exploiting people for profit. So, let's dig in to this Freddie Big Mac of a scam burger.
You're right, that is a stupid fucking joke.
I thought, I wrote it, and I was like, this is awful, right? And I'm like, but I'm leaving it in.
Yeah, it is awful, and then you made us all listen to it.
It wouldn't be one of my episodes with a terrible joke like that.
Freddie Big Mac of us. Now I want McDonald's. So thank you so much.
You're lucky. I'll already let you know. I didn't put any others in here, but I had other candidates like, knowing that Freddie Mac and Cheese knew how to use their noodle, stuff like that. It was their craft, if you will.
They're all bad.
Anyway, welcome back to another episode of White Collars, Red Hands, everybody. It's Kashan hanging out with Nina again, Season 8, Episode 6.
Can you believe that?
No.
We have an update about last week's episode.
We do?
Yes.
I guess we do, Nina.
So, Kashan and I, we plan things so well. Like, we are the best planners. And we knew that Teresa Giudice was getting married this last week.
Oh my god! So when you shared me that Instagram post, that was I thought that was from like before.
No,
it was
last week.
That was from this week.
Yes.
Oh my god.
We planned that.
How are we so perfectly on the button of things? We did the Theranos episode like a week before the trial, like jury selection started. We didn't even know until we started doing the research. And now we've done.
And that's
done
like
this.
the other thing with the Brett Favre episode where we had picked it, and then all that new info came out like when I was researching it.
You know what? We're gonna go ahead and lie and just say we knew. Yeah,
we knew.
We're doing everything at the perfect right time because we're so involved in the scene.
Some would say it's the Lord.
We have we got our hands on the button, right? That's like a thing about like the news.
Sure.
And they're like,
yeah,
mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Hand on the button.
That's me pushing the button. I don't know what's on the table.
I don't know what's on the table either. Don't worry about it. And the button today has a big sign on it. It says Freddie Mac.
Scamburger.
Which supposedly it's like it's the shortening of their their
Frederick McIntyre.
No, because their full name is the Federal Home Loan Mortgage Corporation. So somehow FHLMC is supposed to shorten to Freddie Mac, and I have no idea how they came up with that.
Feel like that's a stretch.
They were just like, I don't know. But we're about to find out it was because of something else. So what exactly is Freddie Mac, and how was it started? Well, You remember from actually quite a lot of our episodes already, but most prominently in the Lehman Brothers episode, we talked about mortgage-backed securities. And, well, we're back to it. In 1938, in the grips of the Great Depression caused housing crisis, the U.S. government decided to create a company by the name of the Federal National Mortgage Association, or FNMA, which later became known commonly as Fannie Mae, which that one kind of makes sense. FNMA, Fannie Mae. So I think they just forced Freddie Mac.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't know, we chose a bad acronym this time. It doesn't sound like anything. So the company, Fannie Mae, was created as part of the ass-eating FDR's New Deal, which if you get that reference, then you've been here for a while.
You've been here a long time.
So thank you for that one. And basically, it created the mortgage-backed security market. No one had ever done it before, but Fannie Mae was created in an effort to make mortgages more available to people. Fannie Mae would buy the mortgages from private lenders, package these debts into mortgage-backed securities, and sell them to investors to work as a middle person.
Okay, so they would buy them.
Yeah, they buy the mortgages, they buy the
and then
debt,
they'd sell them to you.
and then they package them into mortgage-backed securities, and then people can invest in them. So we talked about this in the Lehman Brothers episode, but it's basically it's a way to sell debts to people that want to invest in the real estate market, but not buying property.
Oh, okay.
So it's a second way to do that because you're basically buying and you get paid out when people pay their mortgages.
Okay.
But if a bunch of people default, if a few people default, it doesn't matter. That's the other thing. It diversifies it so that if you just sell one home and someone defaults on the payment, you're just fucked. But if you have all these people packaged into one program, a couple of people can default and it's not going to hurt your profit margin.
Okay.
So it's that. And this caused the mortgage market to become more liquid since the funds the private lenders got from selling the mortgages was used then in turn to offer more mortgages. It increased the amount of money available to people looking to buy a house. So because the lenders could sell the mortgages, they could then offer more mortgages. So more people were able to buy houses.
Okay.
And in the Great Depression, obviously, people didn't have a lot of money.
No one had any money.
So people started not being able to, everyone lost their house, basically. And we just had all these empty houses. So this was their kind of solution to fix that problem. And traditionally before this, housing loans were short-term loans with something called a balloon payment at the end, where at the maturation of the loan, which was only a couple of years, there was still a balance due. So you had to pay a large sum of money at the end of the short duration. So instead of now where, you get it and then you pay over a long time, you would get the loan, pay a down payment, and then you'd pay off the loan, and then at the end you'd have to pay 25% of it off at the end.
That doesn't make sense.
No, it's stupid. And most people, you get to the end, you can't pay it, and you just lose your house even though you've paid
What the fuck?
Yeah, it was dumb.
That's bad planning.
Yes, and that's part of the reason they changed it. And with this government backing, mortgages were instead transformed into long-term fixed rate deals that we know now, which made them more available to the public at large. Once again, just letting people buy houses. And if you find a way for more people to consume goods, it helps the economy. Standard of living. Everyone loves it. So in 1968, it was decided that Fannie Mae, so this is 30 years after its inception in the New Deal, Fannie Mae would go public. And since then, Fannie Mae has been a public company able to be bought and sold to investors across the world. It's listed on stock exchanges. They are a publicly held shareholder-backed company. They're no longer a private governmental institution. But Fannie Mae is the big sister of the company we are talking about today. And when Fannie Mae went public, it split into two companies, one private, one public, and the private institution was largely the one dealing with mortgage-backed securities. So with the belief that competition helps to drive the market, which this is kind of sus, it's weird. I don't know why they did this, but they did it either way. The government decided to create the Federal National Mortgage Association, or good old Freddie Mac, to basically do the exact same thing as Fannie Mae. And they did that in 1970. So it's literally they just cloned the company to have competing companies. But also Freddie Mac focused less on big banks. So like they didn't get stuff from like JP Morgan. They did like so-called thrift banks. They bought mortgages from smaller banks that service small communities. But they did basically the same thing besides that.
Well, were they doing that so it didn't look like it was a monopoly? Like, what was the point of that? Do you know?
I think it was to serve the smaller banks at first, but then they just both kind of ended up doing the same thing.
Okay.
And I think it's because instead of investing in one, now you can invest in two. And once again, like diversification, and they get like, instead of like offering more shares at Fannie Mae, now you have a whole nother company that does basically the same thing, and they can go up and down. And if one goes down, you still have the other one in the market kind of thing. I think it's this big like macroeconomic thing that probably has a bunch of reasons, but it seems kind of stupid on the surface. But Freddie Mac also operated privately for 19 years. But in 1989, Freddie Mac also went public as a shareholder-owned company, and a board was made up of 18 members. Most were elected by shareholders or elected by the board, which is normally what happens, but a few are appointed by none other than the president of these here United States. So both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, not created by Ronald Reagan, both of these entities were technically not fully governmentally run, but had oversight from the government. And because of their classification as a government-sponsored enterprise, they did enjoy certain perks, like being tax exempt at the state and local level.
Why?
Because they're funded by the government, they're backed by the government. And although they are not directly funded by the government, they gain a lot of their profit from doing business in a sector that is heavily propped up by government subsidies. So they are kind of indirectly funded by the government in this way.
This whole thing seems sus.
Because the whole point of them setting it up, though, was to make it so more people could afford houses. And actually 50% of the mortgages they were supposed to support and back were supposed to be for affordable housing.
Okay.
So half of them were supposed to be affordable housing. We'll talk a little bit later about if they actually did that or not.
Gonna go with no.
Well, the way I'm saying it does kind of give you a hint, but yes.
Yeah, I'm reading into the subtext of your voice.
Yeah, 20% of communication is verbal. So they were like set up as a public good company, basically. Mm-hmm. So I can understand like giving tax breaks to what is basically a public service. But it's weird that they decided to mix a public company with being backed by the government. It was kind of an experiment they really hadn't done, and it worked for Fannie Mae, but it's definitely a weird road to traverse.
I don't know. It just seems like a lot of things could go wrong.
Yeah, they half did it. Yeah. And there were a lot of people that are calling for it to make it a public company, like a pure public company with no governmental backing. But even if you do that, you just get this like company that's now way too big. Mm-hmm. It's got so many assets. Both of them have always been listed in the Fortune Top 500. They're in the top 50 of the Fortune 500. Fannie Mae, to this day, holds the most assets of any company in America.
That's a problem.
You know? So it's like you've basically just created a huge private company that now has no governmental or has little governmental oversight and just can like do whatever they want, and which is also not a good idea.
As we've seen here before, that typically doesn't go
it's not
super
a good idea.
well.
When you privatize a whole like enterprise, it's always bad. It's like Enron and how they started boning people over for energy because they privatized utilities.
Right.
So it doesn't work. Also, because of their ties with the government, they were not subject to the same disclosure laws as other public companies up until the creation of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, calling for more transparency in financial records for public companies, which we have discussed previously.
I was going to say, I recognize that name.
It was a fallout of Enron and WorldCom. They decided to make Sarbanes-Oxley because of that. And who knows what they were doing for most of the early parts of their creation. But what we do know is that these companies were doing incredibly well, running what was basically a monopoly on mortgage-backed securities for decades before the private sector got it in the run-up to the mortgage crisis that caused the 2008 recession. But were they doing a little too good? Before the recession absolutely demolished both of these companies' stock prices, another issue would perk up the ears of people looking to short Freddie Mac. And it was the news that some accounting scandal was brewing in the books of the giants.
Bum, bum, bum.
So, I mean, you could kind of tell where this was going.
Yeah.
It's always where it's going.
I was going to say, it's our show. So.
Yeah. We have discussed on April Fool's Day, maybe one time, we'll like start the leading up to a company and then just say like, they're awesome.
Actually, this company is great.
Yeah. Nothing's wrong, except for that's not true about any company. So we probably wouldn't do that. So the year is 2003. And the fall of Enron has taken with it another giant, the very deservingly maligned auditor Arthur Andersen, who paper shredded their way into bankruptcy. And Arthur Andersen just so happened to be the auditor of Freddie Mac. And with their clients dropping faster than Dr. Kevorkian's, Freddie Mac had to find another. In the end, they decided to go with another of the big ones, PricewaterhouseCoopers, which, if you remember, their Indian subsidiary was the auditor for Satyam, which we just talked about a couple weeks ago.
I was like, we've talked about these people.
We have. But when the new auditor was looking over the books of their new client, they noticed some irregularities. And by the way, I just want to hey, shout out, finally in one of these stories, an auditor caught something.
Good job, PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Every time we talk about the auditors always just fucking up. And finally, for the first time, they were forced to switch auditors. And maybe it was the pressure of Enron and Arthur Andersen collapsing that made them we gotta do this by the books. But nevertheless, this story is a redemption arc for the auditor for one time.
Wait, so was PricewaterhouseCoopers the auditor or no?
They were their new auditor.
They were their new auditor.
So
okay.
Arthur Andersen was the auditor of Freddie Mac. After the fallout with Enron, everyone dropped Arthur Andersen as their auditor because they were literally caught
with their pants around their ankles.
Yeah, they were caught obstructing justice. So everyone
they took justice and they were just and then everybody walked in on it.
Very astute metaphor.
Thank you, Nina.
Thank you. This is why we keep you around.
Just dumbing it down for everybody.
So they switched to PricewaterhouseCoopers, and that is who did a look over their financials.
PricewaterhouseCoopers treated accounting the way it should be treated.
Is that their tagline or something? That sounds like, are you doing an ad for Pricewaterhouse right now?
I am. PricewaterhouseCoopers. The way auditing should be treated.
They're not going to hire you if you did that 30 seconds after air thrusting. All right?
I think
you got to think about the context of these things.
I think the juxtaposition of my abilities.
It shows range. Is that what you're going to say? It
absolutely.
Shows, great.
I have a lot of range.
Yeah, you from thrusting to fucking financial institution ads.
Yeah.
You're right.
PricewaterhouseCoopers.
After a deep look, it seemed as if from the period of 2000 to 2003, Freddie Mac had overstated their income by $6 billion through a series of, honestly, pretty hard to understand accounting manipulations. And we've talked about pretty hard to understand accounting manipulations before. This one's worse. And which is why, for the first time on the show, I'm not going to go into detail about it.
There's a lot of firsts today.
You'd have to have someone sit you down and talk to you for hours about it.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. So I'm just going to give you kind of an overview on how they manipulated the numbers because it's intertwined in a lot of different things and intricacies in generally accepted accounting principles and the laws of how to keep your books, and they did slight things against those laws, whatever. But basically, they were splitting up income and moving it around the timeline to falsify steady growth over the years, and also improperly keeping huge reserves to offset their debt. So that's the one I will talk about, is that in GAAP, you have something called a reserve account that will offset your debts because they're made to pay it, so you can pay down your debts. But you're only supposed to keep a certain amount, and they were keeping way too much in the reserve account. So it was downplaying their debt by a lot when they really should have been using those finances for other things. So it's weird. And there was, it all has to do with derivatives, you pay a percentage on something, interest. I'd get there.
I was I don't know.
They ended up hedging a bunch of their stuff in interest derivatives. and interest swaps, and which we've talked about before, but it's just they did a bunch of stuff all together to move it around. So if you want to learn more, feel free to read over the entire 185 report from the Office of Federal Housing Enterprise Oversight, which if you're a fan of governmental oversight reports, I give it a solid 6.5 out of 10.
Did you read it all?
I read a good chunk of it. Yeah. And if you are normal, just stick to this podcast.
I would have not read all that.
Something that we haven't seen before, however, is that Freddie Mac would also understate its earnings at some points. So if they got too much revenue in one quarter, they would find ways to understate it, to move it to the next quarter through creative accounting, to create the illusion of a small incremental growth over time and to downplay the volatility in the market.
Interesting.
So they would not only just overstate their earnings, but they would understate it sometimes because they made too much and they knew that the next quarter would be down. So they just moved it there so that they always grew. Because of this, they often pitch the company to investors as Steady Freddie, when the reality of the situation was quite different.
That's very interesting. We always hear about it being overstated.
Exactly. This is the first time it's very unlike. Also, this is not a traditional like looting of a company like Enron was, where they knew that it was getting towards like the end of a scheme and they were just like pumping and dumping, basically getting their stock as high and then selling all of their stock off. That's not what this was. It wasn't a looting of the company. It was just they wanted to keep hitting like the goals set for them. Mm-hmm. And that's what the whole, it's kind of actually like the going for great scandal at Wells Fargo that we talked about, where it's all about the corporate structure, about focusing on these short-term like goals and focusing so much on the numbers and getting the numbers to the certain point that they forget that they're running a company.
Yeah.
You know? So they'll do anything to just hit the number.
Yeah.
And that's it. We also don't truly know how long this was going on for, as the law states that when a company needs to restate their earnings, they only need to look back at the previous 3 years.
Interesting.
Or at least at the time. I don't know if that's changed now, but at the time they only had to restate their earnings for the previous 3 years, which they did, and that ended up being $6 billion. But overall, they did still understate in the grand scheme of things. I will say that, like they still overstated. So they still said they made more than they did over the long term, so still pretty bad. The biggest problem from this scandal was, like I said, the entire corporate structure from the top down at Freddie Mac. Instead of focusing on providing mortgages to affordable housing, like I said, 50% of those mortgages that they used were supposed to be for affordable housing, with quite a few others supposed to be aimed for low income or underserved areas as well. The oversight body that kept tabs on Freddie Mac, the Department of Housing, Land, and Urban Development, or HUD for short, allowed them to move mostly to servicing middle-class mortgages because that is where more profit was to be made, directly opposing the whole reason the government subsidies were created in the first place. So they were not hitting those percentage targets for where their mortgages were supposed to be going anyway, because they just wanted to maximize profits. And maximizing profits became the only point of the company. The culture moved farther from the public service half to the public profit half, as the top brass pushed to move around the money to meet expectations from Wall Street, because their bonuses were reliant on it. They were paid bonuses based on meeting these numbers. So they weren't an outright looting like Enron, but they still broke the law, and recompense was necessary.
Yeah.
Because of the scandal, the company and the COO/president/vice president of the board, he was all of those things. He was all of those things.
You can't be all those things. This is like when you're playing house as a kid and someone's like, I'm the mom, I'm the dad, and I'm the baby. And it's like, you can't be all those things. You need more character. You need more actors to play all those characters.
You want to hear something even worse?
Oh,
the
God.
CEO was also the chairman of the board. So like both of the top positions in the entire company were held by the same person.
You can't do that.
You're not supposed to. And actually, in that 185-page report, one of the fixes that they suggested was, don't. You should split those two jobs. And they did.
You absolutely should.
Of course. But yeah, they just had like, I don't know if it's because government or what, but they're a public company like that. And they make a fuck ton of money. Like they can pay a second.
Yeah, they're not.
I don't know. So they did that. And then this guy, David Glenn, was the chief operating officer, the president, and the vice president of the board. And him, the company, the CFO, Vaughn Clark, and senior vice presidents, Robert Dean and Nazir Dosani, not the water, it's spelled different, were all charged by the SEC with securities fraud because of this scandal. The case, however, as usual, was settled outside of court with no one person serving jail time. And the company as a whole only had to pay a paltry fine of $125 million. And the executives being fined in the hundreds of thousands, even though they received millions in cash bonuses based on the falsified growth of the company. David Glenn, by the way, in one of those 3 years, he got like a $2.1 million cash bonus.
What?
And they made him pay back like $515,000.
Cash bonus.
Yeah, so not stock options, not even that, because then at least his money would have been fucked because they're obviously, literally, so they're trading for like nothing now. And at this time, they were trading for like $55 a share.
That's insane.
So it's not even stock
cash
options. They gave him a cash bonus of like $2.2 million in addition to his $1.1 million salary. It was 1 year. And because of this they manipulated the books, and he only had to pay $515,000 to the SEC. And the company in general only had to pay $125 million. That's nothing. It's one of the biggest companies in America.
Yeah, it's insane. That's fucking stupid.
And I didn't go about this later, but I did want to mention it at some point that me and quite a few other people believe that it was kind of a cover-up act by the federal government. They didn't want to bring, this is literally one sector of the government like litigating and charging another sector of the government.
Yeah.
So it's already by definition just a very incestuous relationship between them, and the Congress didn't want this to, come out. They don't want, it looks bad on the government in general. Yeah. And it is bad. It's a really bad look for them.
Yeah, no, it is.
So I definitely think that there was some shady shit going on there.
I would agree with you.
So the company did fire most of its executives, but honestly, they didn't change much about their corporate climate, even though the whole thing about it was that they needed to change how they focused on things. In fact, it seems that Freddie Mac instead tried to lobby more to get politicians on their side regarding the scandal. They spent multiple of millions of dollars on campaigns in the coming years. So much so that they actually crossed the threshold of illegality, and they were charged in 2006 for violating campaign funding laws.
Great.
And they were forced to pay another $3.8 million, which at the time...
That's nothing.
At the time, that was the largest fine for violating, to a corporation for violating campaign funding laws. Because that actually was more than what they spent on campaigns.
Okay, that's good.
So at least that's fine. But the thing is that they took to immediately lobbying people after 2004 when this came out. And then they were charged in 2006 with this. The very market that they had created, the mortgage-backed security market, was also now poised to collapse due to the subprime lending bubble that we've talked about multiple times.
So many times, yeah.
Definitely the Lehman Brothers. And Freddie Mac was no exception to the fallout of the recession. In 2007, after sharp declines in the stock of Freddie Mac, the company's shares were delisted and it entered the conservatorship of the federal government. I didn't
know that could happen.
Yeah, so the government just took over the company completely. They were like, okay.
Well, it sounds like they had to. I feel like they didn't really have another choice.
Exactly. They're like, you're doing everything under our like direct direction now.
Yeah.
And also, this is before they already had like one of the perks I didn't even mention is that they could access capital from the Federal Reserve up to $2.5 billion at a premium interest rate, where other companies can't do that. And because of that, their mortgages that were offered through there were also offered at like a lower rate to families and people who bought homes. But that wasn't even enough. Like they could have taken all that and still wouldn't have saved them. So the government just had to be like, all right, you're us now. And they also got a big bailout. They got like $75 billion in bailout money because of the recession. And it still wasn't enough. And even though they have returned to profitability since then, and they paid off all of all of that money back.
That is pretty impressive.
But they still remain under the conservatorship of the federal government to this day.
I don't blame the government on that one.
So it's been 15 years. That happened in 2007.
Oh, shit. That was 15 years ago.
Yeah. A year before the recession hit like real hard.
I mean, I don't really know what other option there would have been. It would have went under.
Yeah. And although technically the government does not have to bail out the company.
Yeah.
Because it is not a purely governmental institution, it was always seen as one of the largest too big to fail institutions because of its ties to the federal government. Basically, people always sold it as, although none of the securities that Freddie Mac gave out were guaranteed by the federal government to be paid back and not go into default, everyone always saw it as like, well, yeah, but what's the government really going to do if it goes under? They're going to bail it out. And they just proved that.
Yeah.
They're like, yep, that's exactly what was going to happen. Congress, at this point, I wanted to remind you, did nothing to stop the collapse of the Lehman Brothers, which was a huge bank that ended up starting the recession because they went under, but they accepted a beat-up Freddie Mac with open arms.
Is that just because it was a government funded?
Basically.
Yeah.
They're like, well, this one would look the worst on us, so we're going to bail this one out. Freddie Mac shares have been listed again for trading, but now go for less than $1 a share. When I mentioned at its peak, it was sold for over $50 a share.
Whoa.
It was selling for like $55 a share in the early 2000s before the accounting scandal came out. And now I look today, you can buy it for 66 cents a share.
66 cents.
Yeah.
That's nothing.
Now the 52-week high, so the high in the last year was $1.21.
Oof.
So
I don't think I'm going to invest.
they are still one of the biggest companies, though. They're the 5th largest company by assets
Would you invest in them?
the country. I don't know. I think we talked about in the Lehman Brothers that like mortgage-backed securities, although scary because of where they came from, you know, there's a lot more oversight in it now because of how bad it was in 2008. So like there's not a lot of subprime. So like, yeah, with reason, like you might, like it might be a sound investment, but like don't put
all your money in it.
Never put all your money in one thing ever.
No.
But yeah, you might be able to make some money in it. It's, you know, whatever. Yeah. I just invest in bonds, though, honestly. Like, if you really just want a secure way to invest in the government, just
bonds,
buy government bonds. You're not going to get a lot of money, but hey, whatever.
It's better than nothing.
Interest rates are high right now, though, so
yeah,
you should be fine. So Freddie Mac started out as a good idea, as many bad things do. But through the corruption of greed and the want to maximize profits for shareholders, it turned into a monster. A monster birthed by the government that helped to cripple the American economy for years with its handling of the mortgage-backed security market. But then again, what do we expect from the same government that can't tell me how much I owe in taxes? How is that my job? It shows us that accounting scandals can happen anywhere and at any time, and that transparency and proper oversight are our biggest weapons in fighting corporate fraud. And that when you want to create a service for the greater good of people, mixing it with the necessity for maximizing profit does nothing but corrupt. Sound familiar? Anyone in Congress? God, I hope there's one senator that listens to us. You could learn a lot. All right. Sorry. I know this one gets mildly political, but no matter what side of the aisle you're on, I think we can agree that our government, above all else, is only good at stagnation. They're only good at not getting a lot done.
Oh, wow. Hot take.
And that's where we'll leave it today. I have a tapestry of Dragon Ball Z characters making out to buy, but this time I'm going with FedEx.
Ooh.
Yeah, fuck you, USPS.
I will say they have not been delivering my mail lately.
What are you doing? What are you doing, USPS?
I need my mail.
I'm just not getting our mail. Jesus.
Dragon Ball Z. I couldn't even name one character on Dragon Ball Z.
All right, it's like, you know, Goku. Goku's the main one.
Okay.
Vegeta. Piccolo.
I've never heard of these people.
Majin Buu. I'm naming only male characters. That might be telling for me.
You're a misogynist? Is that what it is?
Oh, there's Android. One of the women's names. She's a robot. Her name's like literally like Android 10 or something.
I've never Dragon Ball Z'd.
I don't think you've ever watched an anime. You just don't seem like the person.
I don't think I have either.
I wasn't the person till college. I actually used to
What a
Definitely.
fucking weird. He
definitely
never
made
watched
fun
an
of-
anime until college. That's when he found out about hentai.
I don't watch hentai. I'd tell you if I did. I don't. It's weird.
Oh, big boobies.
It's like people who, like, if you only watch cartoon porn, I don't mean to kink shame, but you're probably a little weird.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
You know?
yeah, absolutely.
Like, being, like, if you pull it up every now and again, fine. But if you, like, only watch cartoon porn, something's wrong with you.
I think the only way you should watch cartoon porn is if it's on accident.
And on that note, please, if you liked what you heard today, I don't even know if that's going to be in. It's fine. If you liked what you heard today, you can support us for free by leaving a review on iTunes or leaving us a rating on also iTunes, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Well, Spotify now has ratings. We have 19 ratings on there, I want to say.
Woo!
19 ratings. We're over 4 stars, so thank you for that.
Hell yeah. Thanks, guys.
But we could get over 4.5 if you guys would leave a review on Spotify. Spotify also hosts our videos, the only other place to watch our videos besides Entertainment Buffet on YouTube. Their channel hosts all of our video podcasts that we record now, and you're going to miss all of the fun visual gags like Nina thrusting today. You can also support us for money by buying our merch at TeePublic. You can find the link to our merch in the show description, or you can go to our website, whitecollarsredhands.com, and you can click the button that says check out our merch, and that'll take you right there. But let's say you don't got the money, you still want to support us for free. You can follow our socials, help get the word out there. That's facebook.com/whitecollarsredhands, Twitter at whitecollarspod, Instagram at whitecollars_redhands. We're also on TikTok now, so that's another place you can view some of our video content, little short snippets. That is just White Collars Red Hands, right? That's our handle there? Just White Collars Red Hands? Yeah, perfect. You can also submit an idea to us. We do a fan-submitted episode every season. It's one of the most fun things we do here. I think I love doing fan-submitted episodes and talking about something from a suggestion from you guys. And you can always send those to whitecollarsredhands@gmail.com or use our contact us page also on our website.
Yep. Or DM us.
Yeah, or DM us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, any one of those social medias that I just talked about. Another great way to support us is tell a friend. Say, hey, I've been listening to a podcast called White Collars, Red Hands. They did a whole segment on types of porn you shouldn't watch this week, but also in there was an accounting scandal. So that's kind of fun. You get to learn and be disgusted.
2 for the price of 1.
Yeah, you can learn and be disgusted at the same time. So you can do that. I think that's it.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. So we'll see you next week. Another episode of White Collars, Red Hands.